All right, we're in Isaiah chapter 33. Last week we looked at Isaiah chapter 32. We're in the context again of looking at the situation where Assyria is going to rise up and invade, and it's going to come through and they're going to take off. They're going to inflict a pretty massive casualties on northern Israel. And in that, the fear of Assyria coming up and attacking and sweeping through there, they've already been invaded once in the north. And so the southern kingdom, Judah, is looking at the horizon again, because whenever the king died, Tiglath-Pileser, the vassal states that have been beaten by them decide they're going to rebel. And so in their wisdom, they decide, we're going to try to throw them off. And they thought, well, hey, you know what? We'll line up with Egypt. And that's what we've been looking at from 28 up to this point. And so this is, as we read it, it sounds like he's going backwards, but he's just, this next chapter, 32 and 33, are kind of describing some aspects of this total time in history that they're going to experience, and that they've already experienced some of it. And so the key things we see is that there is a king coming from 32, and that this king is going to come in and rule, and that righteousness is going to be something that's going to be quiet, calm, and where they can absolutely find peace, in which they've not been able to find because they've been trying to find it by alliances with other nations to protect them with their weaponry and their modern warfare of chariots and horses. So now he's trying to show that. In chapter 32, he talks about how the scoundrel and the fool are going to be unmasked, and that the character is going to be seen by their deeds. In other words, all of the stuff that they were doing, saying, oh yeah, we got peace, we've sent down envoys, we're going to have Egypt protect us, Assyria is not going to happen. Well, all those fools are going to be exposed. Because what they said and promised versus what's really going to happen is not going to be the same. And so that's what 32 is going to talk about as well. He gives a warning of people that are just compliant and I've seen complacent, like, that's no big deal. And he uses that in the form of rebuking the women who are just taking it easy, kind of ignoring the obvious things that are going on around them, and that tells them, get ready because it's coming. And that the city and the cities are going to suffer. And remember, Judah, even though Jerusalem will survive, Judah's going to suffer. Lachish and a lot of the cities, the Assyrian king, Sennacherib, is going to inflict upon them pretty brutally. But they're not going to be successful in taking the city of Jerusalem. So he gives that picture, a little bit of bleakness of the fact, and it's been described before, as like standing in a floodwater, and you're seeing the water rise and rise, like being stuck on the Titanic at the bottom of the ship, and the water's coming up, and you know what, it's just going to overtake me, but then it's going to stop, and then it's going to subside. And that's the kind of thing he says, Jerusalem, that's what you're going to face. This is within a couple of years of when this is all going to happen. Some of it has happened, like I said. Assyria has invaded once, but now we're looking at that. So that was one of the great things. And the other great message of that chapter 32 was, after God, in this renewal, you're going to see this final justice and peace. Now that's also a shadow of the reprieve they're going to get, and there's going to be some restoration and some rebuilding, but there's also that long-term shadow of looking at the spiritual kingdom of Zion, and also that king as well. There's that shadow of that king. So you always kind of see this in these. And so when you're reading Isaiah and Jeremiah and a lot of these prophets, kind of think as well, could this be something that's messianic, meaning the Messiah? And a lot of times you can find it. Don't dig too deep and stake a claim on it and say absolute, but a lot of it is, and it can't help but stand out to us. It didn't to them when they read it. When they heard it, at that time, last thing they're thinking about is this Messiah that's prophesied about. But we see it now, and that's what's wonderful about it. As we come to chapter 32, it's God is going to save Zion. Again, this is something that's interesting because it does have a foreshadowing of something greater. Zion is always, God is used as this idea and this symbolism of his house, his tabernacle, where he dwells, where he has his people. And where is that? So is it literal or is it something spiritual and physical? And it's both. And so that's where this one could be, oh, we're Zion. We're sitting in Jerusalem. The Assyrians aren't going to get us. Yeah, he's going to save Zion. But there's also more wordage. It's like, this is a lot bigger. There's something more in this picture as well. So there's this judgment he's going to talk about, and then we see in the very first verse, and he's going to switch to, you're going to hear the penitent prayer of the righteous and this glorious future toward as he gets to the end. So really the Lord, and this is what these chapters have really been trying to teach. Now I want to bring up something. We look at these, and a lot of times we go, well, that's kind of the national spiritual level, and that's just history from over nearly 3,000 years ago. These are very personal lessons as well. Where do you place your trust? Where are you building your alliances in the world? Is it with, the physical things around us? Is it heavily reliance on friendship versus the Lord? Where do we place our hope in being able to survive and enjoy and prosper? And that's hard because we live in the physical world, right? We live in the physical world. So we tend to forget about the spiritual side. And that's the downfall of the historical evidence that we see in the Old Testament, where God leads them through the Red Sea, physically saw it, and then what? Not a week later, they're complaining. They forget about the spiritual. And that's our problem too. That's why, even though we're reading these prophecies about things that happened thousands of years ago, the principles are very applicable, very personal. And so when we talk about the Lord being our stability and our salvation, it's not just him talking in, it's also as well for us. So I want us to, as we're reading these, think about that because that's a foundational teaching that he's putting through these prophets for us today. And so verses 1 through 6, he's going to give a warning to the destroyer. Now, who's that? Well, it's Assyria. So he's talking about Assyria. And then in this, we see this prayer, this interesting way that he brings that in. So let's read 1 through 6. Ah, you destroyer, who yourself have not been destroyed, you traitor, whom none has betrayed. When you have ceased to destroy, you will be destroyed. And when you have finished betraying, they will betray you. O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. Be our arm every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. At the tumultuous noise of peoples, flee. When you lift yourself up, nations are scattered, and your spoil is gathered like as a caterpillar gathers, as locusts leap, as it is leapt upon. The Lord is exalted, for he dwells on high. He will fill Zion with justice and righteousness, and he will be the stability of your times, abundance of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge. The fear of the Lord is Zion's treasure. So treachery is going to be judged. Right away, he says, Assyria, you right now are the destroyer. And you haven't been hurt. You haven't been destroyed. You, Assyria, are betraying everything. You are the betrayer. You haven't been betrayed, but it's coming. You think you're in charge, but you're not. And we've already seen where he got very specific in how catastrophic the fall was going to be for Assyria. And I love this because he says when you stop this, when it's all stopped, and when you think it's all nice and finished and everything, guess what? You're going to be betrayed. Now remember what I said, what happened to the king of Assyria? After he failed to capture Jerusalem, he goes back home to Nineveh, and while he's there, he goes down to worship in his temple's false gods, and guess who betrays him? His own sons murder him. So, does it fit? Yeah, that's why we call it prophecy. It fits. In this, you see a prayer of the faithful, the remnant, that while all this distress is going on, and we see it, now this is us. First off, when we see a destroyer, we see a betrayer, whether it's in our personal lives or we see it on the world stage when we're listening to the news, what has God said to them? Well, he spoke to one that we have historical evidence about, and that was Assyria. It's the same message. Those who are destroyers, those nations and leaders that are betrayers, the Lord is going to get the final judgment on them. And so as we watch this, it's terrifying, isn't it? It is terrifying to have your country invaded and you're cowering down behind the city walls and there's no hope of surviving. Where do you go? Well, this is where the prayer comes in and says, Lord, be gracious to us. This is our prayer during turbulent times. When we see things happening on the news and all around us, this is our prayer. This should be ours. Oh, Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. You see, that's our problem. We're impatient, right? We want it to happen now. Destroy that destroyer, Lord. Kill that betrayer now. They're getting too close. Oh, no, they're like 10 miles away. No, stop them now. Why'd you wait till they got around the city walls? Wait. Just be calm. And that should be our prayer. When we see things closing in around us and we feel like, just wait. The Lord's in charge. The Lord is in charge. That's what we call sovereign. Be our arm every morning. When you get up in the mornings, let him be your strength. You see? Don't use your strength. Use his. I love that. He is the only one that can save us in these troubled times, is also a part of his prayer we see here. And we see that during these tumultuous noises, and what are those? The actual cannons? No, a lot of times it's just turn your TV or your news feed on and watch. And you see the terror of things that are going on and the panic people have and everything. And what happened? There are people running around, they're losing their minds and panicking, and even some Christians are, oh, here it comes, the end times, this is the end and everything, and just panicking. You know what? Don't. Because when you lift yourself up, nation, when God comes up, when he rises up, you know what happens? They scatter, like roaches when the light comes on. So that's what is going to happen. Nations are scattered, and you're spoiled. What's a spoil? The spoil is a collection of the things of warfare. What do? They evacuate. They leave everything. And what he sees there is how the type of a warfare. So the Lord is exalted. Why? Because he dwells on high. That's why he's exalted. He doesn't live down here. He doesn't live in this corrupt world. He lives far above it. And this idea, he will fill Zion with justice and righteousness. Now that's like, well, from the time there all the way to the fall, even up to Jesus' day, Zion was questionable morally, right? I mean, was there ever really this type of fulfillment totally? No. So this is what I mean when you say, well, wait a minute, after Hezekiah, Josiah comes along and he was a pretty good king, but after that, oh man, you have some horrible kings. You have some corrupt priesthoods. And then they get taken away. Okay, they come back from captivity. They start out pretty good, don't they? They have Ezra, Nehemiah, and they start to do pretty good. That doesn't last too long. God's punishing them all the way through. And then we come to the New Testament. What was it like in Zion then? Not real good. I mean, after all, they killed the Messiah himself when he showed up. So when we read this, you have to go, there's got to be something bigger, a fulfillment that God's looking at as well that's bigger. Now, when they heard this, they probably didn't grasp it. And that's why we can look back and why it's so much more impactful. Because as we look at it, we know what Christ established. And we know his kingdom. And we know where God's glory, and it has been fulfilled now. He fills Zion. Where's Zion? It's where God dwells. So where's he dwelling? Among us, in this kingdom, this invincible kingdom that Daniel prophesied about. So we can see that. And what's there? Abundance of salvation, wisdom, knowledge. The last part of that in 6, when he says, the fear of the Lord is Zion's treasure. When have you ever treasured fear? When you say something is treasure, it's valuable, right? Something is a treasure, it has value. So that's where you have to go, okay, I never felt like the fear of my father was a treasure, his belt. Never saw that as a treasure. So when we look at this, what's he referring to is the idea, what does it do for you? I'll tell you what the fear of my dad did. It kept me obedient, kept me respectful, and kept me very peaceful with my father. And I got a lot of reward by being obedient and respectful. And so there was a fear of the belt. I'm not saying God's that way, but in a sense there is that. There's a part that is a little terrifying, isn't there, about God's wrath, about God's power, about who God is. It's fearful. But that should cause us to do a couple of things. One, revere him, love him, respect him. And it should also remind, and it should be fearful when we consider and we see the power that he worked, and especially like what he ended up doing to Assyria. In one night, 185,000 men were killed. You wake up and you stand on that wall and you look out, what are you going to see? And you see these dead bodies all around, and you know God did it. Even though it protected you, you know that's a little fearful, and you thank God you weren't on the other side of that wall. So the collapse, and he's describing again the conditions of what they're going to be experiencing during this type of hostile situation with the Assyrians coming in and everything, and showing the description of the collapse and the sadness that's going to be on there, and why, and that's what the causes them. Because he's saying, behold, their heroes cry in the streets, the envoys of peace weep bitterly. The highways lie waste, the traveler ceases. Covenants are broken, cities are despised, there is no regard for man. The land mourns and languishes. Lebanon is confounded and withers away. Sharon is like a desert. Bashan and Carmel shake off their leaves. Remember earlier, in about 28 and 29, he brought up the fact you're sending these ambassadors down, and you're the one that's going to look foolish because it's going to fail. And they come back, and they're saying, we sealed the deal. We went down, our diplomatic mission was successful. The Pharaoh said he will send chariots, he's going to arm us, and he will bring forward his military. And so, but what's going to happen when all this happens? Behold, your heroes, the very people that were taunting and you held up, guess what? They're going to be crying in the streets. Those envoys who have peace, how do they explain it when they see Assyria surrounding them that night and everybody's looking at them going, what happened to this? You promised us. This is a part of exposure that he talked about in 32, about the foolishness is going to be exposed, the fool, and the wisdom that they were trying to have among the worldly type of wisdom was going to be totally foolish. Covenants broken. Egypt broke their covenant. They couldn't hold it up. Cities are despised. Cities that once were so cherished and beautiful, he says, are just going to be totally despised. No regard, no respect for anyone. Survival of the fittest. It's going to be like an animal out there. The land is going to suffer as well. The land's going to suffer because of the warfare, the destruction of property, of crops, and all these things are going to happen. So it's going to reverse. You're going to have a reversal. From Lebanon being such beautiful and powerful, remember we talked about Lebanon, that it's going to be the other way. It's going to wither away. Sharon, these beautiful places, going to turn to a desert. Bashan and Carmel, again, places of great futility and prosperity, it's going to be wiped out. 10 and 11, though, starts to change with the rising of the Lord in judgment. Now I will arise, says the Lord. Now I will lift myself up. Now I will be exalted. You conceived chaff. You gave birth to stubble. Your breath is a fire that will consume you, and the peoples will be as if burned to lime, the thorns cut down that are burned in the fire. You notice at the very beginning, he says, he triples down on now. He says, now I will arise. Now I will lift myself. Now, notice it's 3. It's declaring his decisive divine intervention. And it's purposeful. Now I will rise. Now I will lift up myself. Now I will be exalted. No doubt, when this judgment occurs, that's exactly what's going to be demonstrated to them. What you did, you conceived, was like chaff. Chaff is something extremely flammable. Gone. And the best you could produce was stubble, things that are cut down. All those negotiations, all those worldly plans you had. Your breath is a fire, but the problem is it's going to burn you up. Usually somebody who's breathing fire, when the Lord is breathing forth fire or bringing out fire, it's upon where it goes. This is going to, your own fire, we are going to, it's going to come and burn you up. It's going to take you down. And it's going to be thorough, burned to lime, cut down like thorns. So who can handle this, right? And that's what he says. Who can dwell with that consuming fire? And that's what he addressed. He goes, listen to the way he pronounces. He says, hear, you who are far off, what I have done, and you who are near, acknowledge my might. The sinners in Zion are afraid, trembling has seized the godless. Who among us can dwell with the consuming fire? Who among us can dwell with everlasting burnings? So there's the question. Here's the answer. He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, who despises the gain of oppression, who shakes his hands, lest they hold a bribe, who stops his ears from hearing the bloodshed and shuts his eyes from looking on evil, he will dwell in the heights. His place of defense will be the fortress of rocks. His bread will be given to him. His water will be sure. So God is demonstrating that this effect is going to not only affect those who can witness it and see it, but it's going to spread. You remember when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and they were traveling around for 40 years and they came into the land and they approached Jericho? You remember what Rahab said? We have heard what your God has done. That's what he's saying here. This is going to go wide and far, this proclamation of what I've done. And those who are in my house, those sinners that are in rebellion, seizing is causing them to tremble. You know why? Because their noble man, the one that was their hero, the one that was their peace negotiator, has completely failed them. And now they've been caught in failing and trying to devise their own security, and now God is the only answer. And they have been ignoring him. So you better be afraid. And so they're going to tremble. So when this fire comes and this judgment comes, the question is, how can we handle this? Who can do this? And he tells you, I'll tell you who it is. It's the righteous. The righteous that are living right among you. So while this consuming terror and all this is happening around them, what are we doing? What are we supposed to be doing? We're letting the arm of the Lord be our strength. We are relying, like the prayer was in the previous verses. And then what they're going to see is who survived that burning. And when it settles down, they're going to look around and not only realize the judgment that came against them was the foolishness of their own disobedience to God, but they're then going to see that the righteous, those who are following, are the ones who are being prosperous. And that we can look around. We can see that in life as well. Who are really, truly relying on God and trusting in him and his promises? And who is relying on getting answers from their friends or their doctors or different things? And that's it. That's all. My big solution is through finances, physical things of the world. That's going to solve it. And it's not that you ignore those things, okay? I'm not saying don't go to your doctor. I'm not saying don't talk to your friends. But when you leave God out of it, that's a problem. If they would have consulted God about saying, Lord, we think that we can send an envoy to Egypt and we believe that, we can go down there and get them on our side. Lord, what do we do? The Lord would have come back and said, don't go. And they should have said, okay, you're okay. But they never asked. They just did it. And then the Lord tells them. So that's the difference. So when you're facing these problems, who are you asking as you're going about solving the dilemmas and problems that we have and helping to make sure that you are going the right direction and having the wisdom, as James says, to be able to interpret what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. 17 and 22, he describes the king and his beauty and the security of Zion. Your eyes will behold the king and his beauty. They will see a land that stretches afar. Your heart will muse on the terror. Where is he who counted? Where is he who weighed the tribute? Where is he who counted with towers? You will see no more insolent people, the people of an obscure speech that you cannot comprehend, stammering in a tongue you cannot understand. Behold, Zion is the city of our appointed feast. Your eyes will see Jerusalem, an untroubled habitation, an immovable tent, whose stakes never be plucked up, nor will any of its cords be broken. But there the Lord in majesty will be for us a place of broad stream, rivers and streams. There will be no galley with oars can go, no majestic ship can pass. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. He will save us. So the vision now shifts from terror to beauty under a king with his favor now. The former oppressors, they're gone. They're going to be removed. So fear doesn't last forever. So even though things that we see around us will be terrifying, understand it's not going to last forever. But Jerusalem is being portrayed as this tent that can't be blown away any longer. There is some things I can see in this where he's also describing about these foreign languages and speaking that and not having that, kind of, because when they went off into captivity, guess what? Everywhere they went was foreign language. I mean, they ended up learning a new language. And so, but there is this image of this purifying of restoration as well. And we can see some deeper level of application looking to Zion. This unity of people from all nations, all where nothing can ever take it over again. Again, Daniel chapter, when he talks about the kingdom that will never be destroyed, is the final kingdom that will come. And this is where we can see the Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, our king, and he's the only one that is absolutely going to save us. The final reversal and forgiveness of 23 and 24. Your cords hang loose. They cannot hold the mast firm in its place or keep the sail spread out. They then prey and spoil in abundance will be divided. Even the lame will take the prey. No inhabitant will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven their iniquity. The enemy's strength is pictured as being broken, like a rigging, the mast where it's powerless. You know, once you bust the rigging, the sail no longer can hold air, so it just flaps. It's gone. And that the spoils now, instead of being taken by all those in power, the destroyer taking those, he shows a reversal. That now those who are perceived by the world as being weak, they're the ones that are actually going to. So God is overturning and showing a picture of overturning the power that the world has tried to inflict on others and gathering power and resources and invading, where it's going to be a reversal. And then the highest part is that this idea of when he says no inhabitant will say I'm sick. This is spiritual. This is a sinful type. Not that there's going to be no diseases or headaches or any problems physically. He's talking about spiritually. Why? Because the people who dwell there will be forgiven of their iniquity. Now understand, they're under Mosaic law. Sins aren't forgiven under Mosaic law. Right? So if they were really listening to this, they're as confused because they're like, wait a minute. The best we can do is offer sacrifice and give atonement. That's about it. So you see how we looking back can look at this and say, well, so when was it forgiven? It was with the blood of Christ, the Lamb. And so being a part of this, there's nobody in the spiritual kingdom that is sick. Wait a minute. We all are sinners. No. We're not talking about people who fail and have sin and will occasionally sin. He's talking about somebody that lived like it was in Jerusalem, where it was God's house, and the very priests were so corrupt and sinful, and they continue to have that influence. See, in God's spiritual kingdom, they're not in it anymore. They're removed. They're not a part of it, and they can't affect it. You might affect it in certain congregations and have some of that stuff happening, but it's not when it comes to the kingdom of God that we live in. And so when we look at the key takeaways on this, God is really looking at the opposition against the treachery, and he exalts the righteousness. And we have to understand, one of the greatest one is he is the only thing that's going to give us that pure stability. And it's his people that he gives it to. Holiness has that amazing effect of both terrifying and transforming. And that's what we see as his message. The other thing is God's king is going to bring this beauty, and he's going to bring this security that you can only find with him in it. The ultimate blessing is forgiveness. And that was something, again, remember, under the Mosaic law, they really never received. All they got was atonement for those sins, not a forgiveness. The forgiveness was going to come to the future. And as long as they were atoning those sins, and that when Christ came, then they were forgiven. They were living obedient according to the covenant. But there was a little bit of a problem with that old covenant law. They could not provide complete forgiveness because it was what? Animal blood. And so that's one of the things that we have as well. So that's one of the main parts of chapter 33. If you're here with us this evening and there's something that we can do to assist you in your relationship with him, whether it's to offer prayers or to help you become a Christian, or you have questions that we can help you with, we're going to be singing this invitation song. And I hope that if you have any needs or wants or something you'd like to get help with, we hope that during this song, if you're comfortable, you'd come forward and let us know and share with us. So let us think about this while we stand and sing.